All right, we are back with another installment here of Accepting the Challenges, where we want to give educators and the education support staff, if you will, shine, allow this to be a place to where teachers, educators, and really anybody interacting with today's youth and helping build up today's youth, a place to share their story, share their wins, share their losses, so that as a whole, we can build a better education community really around the world. So today's guest is a guy who I stumbled across, and I will tell you, with today's current events and the journey that he's had, I'm super thrilled to have him on. Nate Deans Jr. I'm gonna call him Nate for short. Nate, if you will introduce yourself and share a little bit about what you are doing right now, and then we'll kind of go through your journey and a little bit of who you are and those kind of things.
Okay. Yeah. So my name's Nate. Definitely, Nate is cool with me. So currently I'm in a moment of transition. For the last few years, I was a teacher, taught English, African American literature, history and studies, a lot of things like that. But I'm currently moving from the job that I was at. I stepped out of the classroom for a year to do some instructional leadership, some instructional coaching for teachers, helping them give them supports for certain things. And right now, as of Monday, actually, I'll be starting a new position with Milwaukee Public Schools. There's a component where we do some mentoring of some male students. So it's called the Black and Latino Male Achievement Program. And it's a district-wide thing. And so I'm going to be a coordinator with that. So I don't know exactly all of what that entails yet, but I know I'll be a part of some student mentorship, reaching out to folks around, the city of Milwaukee, try to get our students connected to other things, and establishing careers and goals for themselves, and just getting them hooked up and figuring out, navigating high school, things like that. So I'm headed towards that part. So I'll be doing a lot of mentoring and things like that.
Awesome. And I think the elephant in the room, people are going to hear you're in Milwaukee, you're helping mentor Black students and those things, obviously with the current events that have kind of transpired over the last couple months. It's probably something that no doubt is going to be even more needed. Can you give me, so are you from Milwaukee originally, Nate? So
Born and raised.
Okay, so you're from there, so you have a really good feel, I would guess, of kind of the climate for people of color, students of color in where you're at. Is it kind of almost like this is perfect timing for you? Like this happened and now you get to play a really big part of kind of helping change the mindset and narrative and the path, I guess, for something that's, I guess, under such a big spotlight.
Oh yeah, definitely. I felt like I've been kind of working towards being in a position I am for a few years now. The Department of Black and Latino Male Achievement kind of started about 3-4 years ago. And when it started, I was at, the high school and I was teaching there, and I was a part of implementing the aspects of the program at the school I was at. So now I'm transitioning from working with one specific school to being able to implement things on a district level. So this is definitely like the opportune time for me to do it. I just finished up my master's degree in administrative leadership.
Congrats.
So, thank you. Thanks. So like all of these things were, kind of going in line for me to be able to be in this position. And I'm just thrilled, to take on that challenge.
Man, that's awesome, and that's a great program. I definitely want to, as we talk about your journey a little bit, I definitely want you to share what you can about that program, because there's going to be no doubt some superintendents, some principals, some educators in other areas maybe who are looking to do a program like that. So kind of giving them some insight, I think, will be really, really good. So you grew up there in Milwaukee. Tell me a little bit about your journey in life and kind of how that purposefully led to education or accidentally led to education.
Yeah, more of an accident.
Sure.
So born and raised here. Started out in the district that I'm working for now, Milwaukee Public Schools. Did most of my schooling there. I took about a year. My family, we moved away for like a year to California, just for some different issues or whatnot. But I definitely went through, the public school system. I know you were sharing some things before about your high school experiences, and I can definitely relate to that. Where it was like
you weren't the idol. You weren't the ideal student.
Not at all.
Okay. Okay.
I definitely had my struggles and my issues, and it wasn't that I wasn't smart. I was just one of those kids where I needed to be pushed. I needed to be challenged. And I would challenge and push back on a lot of things.
So if I can ask, if I can ask, did you deal with some environmental things you think that maybe led to that?
There were a few components of that, right? Like my parents divorcing when I was around middle school, high school. So like not having my parents and my dad in my life for most of my life during that time. I think that kind of led me to, think that I had control of my own life, because I had to, like, in high school, work and, help
you're having to pay for some things and make sure you get some meals and those kind of things.
So I became that person, that, stepped up. So there was that kind of component of it. But it wasn't as hard per se. A lot of it was just me and just who I was and just being a kid and just being, having friends want to do certain things. And I liked school, but I didn't necessarily like some of the teachers that I had. And I'll just be honest, because they didn't know how to relate to me. They didn't know how to reach me.
So let me ask you about that. Were a majority of your teachers, I'm going to assume they were white?
Yep.
Okay, so this is really, really good. So you being a teacher now, you can respect the differences in how that actually looks. So what do you mean when they couldn't relate? Like what do you mean? And then also maybe share some insight on, like, what are some things they could have done, or what are the thing you wish as a young man of color, everybody that's teaching you and telling you what to do is white. And, I don't know what neighborhood you grew up in, but historically that cannot be the case. Right. So what are some things you do wish that they would, like, what did you notice as a kid? Cause obviously that sticks out. Right. So what did you notice as a kid that maybe you were like, man, I wish.
And I guess, and I should say, before I answer that, like, it wasn't every teacher, because there were certain teachers that definitely gravitated, who I gravitated towards, and I appreciate.
What did they do? What did they do?
And the thing was just being relatable, like asking about who I was as a person, right? And then not being judgmental and saying, and assuming that I didn't want to learn because of XYZ, but taking that extra step to really figure out, like, what is it that I know? Because a lot of my teachers knew I was smart, right? But there's this thing in education where we want our kids to be so compliant, and sometimes compliance hinders what a student knows, right? It's like sometimes you got to give up that freedom. And so, like, good teachers to me gave me the freedom and the flexibility to create and to be able to do the things that I do or could do as a student within the realm of their pushing me and leading me towards wanting to be educated. But like you said this earlier, there's a system where that doesn't allow our Black and brown kids to thrive in that way, right? Where their intelligence and the things that they bring get suppressed because it's seen as disrespectful or defiant, right? And so there was this clash between these teachers that I had who just wanted me to do XYZ when I didn't fit in XYZ, right?
Yeah.
And like my mind was somewhere else,
yeah,
as far as like the things and ways that I learned and gravitated, because I was smart. Like I knew I was smart and I knew I could do the work. It was just a matter of me not wanting to, right? Yeah. Because it wasn't engaging me. It wasn't pushing me towards those levels.
Yeah.
That in turn kind of inspired me to go into education, like being able to go back. Cause I was definitely like down there on the class rank and all of that, right? Like it wasn't. I was not the model student. Like my junior year, which in high school is the most important year ever. I mean, I averaged like a 1 point something, 1 point, whatever, and then like the one semester, one mark period, I think my GPA was a 0.5. Right, I was going to school. I wasn't even skipping class. I was going, doing the things I wanted to do, but just not being engaged and not being tapped into. So
yeah, my senior year, for the entire senior year, my GPA was a 0.7. Mm-hmm. So I can definitely relate. And the cool part, I guess the cool part, but also the not cool part is, and that's kind of what I try to express, especially when I'm talking to young people, is everybody's not going to fit into this box that you're given, right? And like you said, the good teachers, it's all like teachers don't really have a whole lot of freedom to freestyle from an educational standpoint, either because the district may not allow it, or they're overcrowded classes. And how do you don't want the smart kids to not continue to progress, and you don't want the kids who are smart but struggling to get it to so it's like it truly is a challenge. And that's awesome that you went through this as a young person and say, you know what, hey, I want to try and help fix. I want to try and help be a part of that. And I think a lot of it goes to we could speaking to kind of some of the current events with police brutality and the issues within police departments. A lot of it in education is the same thing, especially when you're dealing with inner city. I'll just say inner city schools, whether it's black, brown, white kids, whatever, is you have teachers teaching these kids who don't live where they live, who don't understand the environment, that don't come from that. And, I mean, I live here in Kentucky, right? And there are, I would argue there are more teachers than not coming from rural areas where there are no people of color, and then getting a job in a city and now being in a classroom of 9 kids of people of color, and they're using words that the teachers don't understand. They're listening to music that they don't understand. They're using slang terms that they don't understand. So I can understand the level of discomfort for a teacher, but at the same time, if you're going to teach, you kind of have to learn, you got to learn to, it's kind of like if you're going to marry somebody from a different country or a different religion, and you fall in love with that person, the respectful thing, more than likely you're going to take some effort to learn, your customs. And I do it. I travel a lot around the world, and that's the same way. You go to China, I want to know how they greet. Do they shake hands? How do they exchange business cards? What are the because that's, like it's like going to somebody's house, right? So, to create a safe, comfortable environment. And I can say this because I grew up, I grew up in the inner city. I know I've seen it. I come from, I played sports, so I've been around it and experienced it. And, you don't really understand me. Even me as a white guy who totally, grew up and absorbed the urban hip hop culture, growing up. It's like, I'm looking at these teachers and I'm like, you have no idea. And then what's funny now is we now have an era of teachers who grew up on, listening to Tupac and listening to these people. And it's like, they're listening to this still riding to school every day now. So it's, it's kind of funny, but, so you go through, is your journey, you finally graduate high school. Was that more of a sigh of relief, or was that?
It was, and it's the funny part about it is, like, after graduating high school, going into my second semester senior year, not really knowing what I was going to do after high school. Like, I had no plans on going to college, right? So the second to last day that I was even in school, I had a really special guidance counselor, right? Her name's Miss Daniels. Her and I are still close today. And she's the only reason, I tell people the story, she's the only reason I even went to college. I didn't fill out any college applications. I did none of that. The second to last day, I go to the guidance office because You know, I'm down there getting my yearbook from somebody that I let use it. And you know, they were signing off, whatever. And she hears my voice in the office, and she's like, you know, she's like my mom, right? So she calls me by my she gives me that full name, like Nathaniel Deans Jr. What are you doing getting in my office, right? Like
I know you didn't come in here and not say something to me,
right? Yeah. So I'm like, I had no idea. Like I'm like, okay, so what's going on? Like I didn't do anything. I don't think I did anything because I respect this woman, right? And this, and kind of to be even before I even tell this to piggyback, like she was like my mentoring program. Right. So like she did things, and going back on things that you talk about what people do. She did things that was above and beyond her job to make sure that, you know, the kids she worked with got it. So there was a group of guys, man, that I'm still cool with today. And she would open up the gym, the school gym on Saturday mornings. And so we would play ball from 8 to 12 all Saturday morning. And then after we played basketball, she would bring us lunch, and we would eat lunch there, and we would just sit down, talk, and do all types of stuff, man. And then she took us on trips. We went to the Circle City Classics in Indiana.
Yeah.
You know, just really taking that time out.
Was she one of those? Was she one of those teachers that was real with you? You know, she might.
Oh yeah.
She's gonna talk to you real, and you know, different than the other teachers were. You know, tell you to. You heard
how she called me. You heard how she called me in an office, right?
yeah, no doubt.
So anyway, I get in the office. I'm like, you know, what's going on, Miss Daniels? What's the problem? And she's like, boy, I just found out you haven't filled out any college applications. I said, ma'am, I'm not going to college. No. She says, yes, you are. And she had one application for MATC, Milwaukee Area Technical College. And she said, you're going to fill this out, and then I'm going to make sure that you go take your placement test, all these other things. I sat down in the office, filled out that college application, man. The rest is history.
Awesome.
You know what I'm saying? Like, that one moment led me up to having all the things that I have right now.
Yeah.
And it really showed me, like, man, like I'm at this point. I didn't do it. I started my first semester at MATC, got my steam going. You know, I'm like, oh, you know, college is cool. I can do this. And then when I don't know if I'm saying too much, but like because like my journey in high school, while that was something too, I don't even know if I mentioned. Well, I'll mention that later. But my journey in high school, while that was something, it's even, and I know there's a lot of educators and a lot of people that's listening right now, and you even mentioned yourself about like the teacher force, right, and how it's so white. But I think when you talk about systems, this component of my story too also goes into like why that is, because man, it was difficult going through as a Black male the university aspect of it to become where I am, right? Like to get where I am, like it was really a passion that I had. So like going from the technical college where it's like, man, I can do this, you know, and I got my steam going. My wife had just, you know, she was teaching, or she's a teacher too.
Okay.
So like we were going through the same thing. We were going through the same thing together, like just grinding, doing it all together. You know, I want to go over to the university. And so I'm like, you know, my second semester, I want to start at University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. And so I get it going, and I try to enroll over. They send me a rejection letter.
Oh.
Send me a rejection letter saying, you know, because of your high school stuff, and we got to make sure that you're ready for this university. So, I mean, think about how defeating that was, right?
Yeah. Now, you did 2 years at technical college?
I did, 2 semesters a year. 2 semesters,
so
2 semesters at a technical college, because I had to prove myself that I was good enough to be at the PWI, you know, UWM. So I did that, got through those things, finally got to university. I'm going to classes. I'm the few Black faces that you see in those classrooms, right?
Yeah.
Right? Because I'm at a predominantly white institution, right? That's where I went. And so I'm the few Black faces that you see. And then, you know, there's a camaraderie of, you know, there's this African-American like chapter of the school.
Sure.
But I was so focused and driven. Like I was, you know, my traditional college experience was not necessarily traditional, right? Because I had just got married when I was 21. We had my daughter, so I was working while going to school.
You had a bit more responsibility than most 21-year-olds.
Way more,
Yeah.
like way more. So, we were starting life early. So going to those classrooms, being in like that, it was intimidating to be in a room of people that may not understand your stories. And I would be in some classes like political science. I remember my political science teacher, when they get to the black question, pointing me out of a room of 100-some people and being like, yo, can you answer this?
So let me dig into this a little bit.
Yeah,
so what you're getting into is something that again, I don't think that I think there is a sector of teachers, professors, educators that don't understand exactly what you're saying and explaining. So above and beyond the normal rigors and stress of school and trying to learn and trying to get and trying to make sure, you had life, but there's another piece to it that you didn't choose, that you're given, and that is the color of your skin. So there was an added level of stress on you where you're trying to make sure that you fit in. You're trying to make sure that you understand, and you're trying to make sure that they don't look at you a certain way or, write you off because, whatever. And that's important. Now at 21, you have a little bit more wherewithal and intelligence and experience kind of through life to be able to navigate that a little bit. At 12, you don't, right? At 12, you don't. And you just think that it's normal, right? Like you go, you think that it's normal. So, I think there is a piece to that's why I think that's why it's so huge for white people in general, but especially white educators, to educate yourself, read books, watch documentaries, immerse yourself into a culture and society that maybe you don't understand, because the reality of it is once the level of discomfort and the unknowns and the unfamiliarities is peeled back, we're actually very similar, right? We're all like, there's a lot more we have in common than we don't have in common. It's the things on the surface that look and feel like we don't have a lot in common. So cool. So you're in college, you're going through it, you're fitting in. Go ahead. I didn't mean to.
No, I'm glad you brought that up. That's actually true, because even in going into like the work that I'm getting ready to do, right? Like your perception of school, it is set early, right? So that's why, and I always, even when I tell the story, I always tell people like my experience is not typical. Like, but at the same time, it's a tragedy that I am the only one. Well, it feels like I'm the only one at times, right? That gets to experience these things, when I know there are a lot of other minds. There's a lot of other people that could have the same opportunities as me. But like you said, life happened, things happen, systems were designed to make sure that people who can thrive don't thrive, right? And so think about, like, it's perfect example, like the thing with Malcolm X. Like when Malcolm X asked his teacher when he was younger, or told them he wanted to be a lawyer, and they're like, dude, lawyer, no, you'd be best as a janitor. Like those systems, those things are real. And when you're a young mind, that stuff shapes you, right? And so while I was able to persevere and go through it, there are a lot of other people that are not like me, that wasn't typical like me, who took a negative liking to school. Like it became a negative thing. So definitely, like, that's part of what you're hearing in the story that I'm telling, right? That's, well, I want to be intentional.
Sorry to interrupt, but you talk about that Malcolm X story. The other flip side to it, and I actually do this when I speak to kids, right? I speak to a group of students at a school, and I'll ask, what do you want to be when you grow up, right? Mm-hmm. And you hear a lot of, I want to be a professional athlete. I want to be a performer or a singer, dancer, rapper. I want to be a movie star. Like, well, then my response is, okay, those aren't going to happen. So now what? Mm-hmm. Well, I don't really know. And the fact is, and I tell this, the reason, because money has been given such a value and priority to people who are less fortunate. I was one of those kids. And you look at, I just want to do $1 million. I can't wait till I make $1 million. Well, the reality of it is even most people in society don't know, to be in the top 1% of all earners in the United States, you only have to make $340,000 a year. That's it, right? So when you actually look and say, wait a second, I don't have, you know how hard $1 million is to make? Like,
right.
So now you say the top 1%, you know what kind of life a person can live making 70, 80, 90, $100,000 a year and happy? You can do whatever you want to do.
Right.
And you know, it's that failure. That's part of that system that has failed. And look, it does happen to more kids who come from less fortunate. It does happen to more kids who are people of color. And the reality of it is that's part of it, is give me exposure. Like, I never had any idea what entrepreneurship was. I never had any idea that I could take my personality and my story and all that I'm going through, and I can now come and get paid to come and speak to this program that you're doing and educate kids and motivate kids and make a difference like that. And so we're not taught these things,
right?
That, you know, again, it's a system that fails, but there are things we can do to fix it. And that's the journey you're on. So go ahead.
Well, I just want to kind of comment on what you said, because you said something important, especially when you're talking about, you know, when you ask the kids the things that they want to be, right? And again, it's based off this perception. So like when we really think about that, like our kids see success as professional athlete, ball player, all those things. And a part of me entering into the teaching field is it was all about perception. Right. And this is before when I first started my first few years, I didn't get it at first. I didn't understand. I just thought I was going in, you know, to give back into a system that, one, I felt like I could have did way more better than when I was a student. And also to, you know, not give other kids the experiences that I had as a student. Right. Like those negative things and building those relationships. But you definitely mentioned, you know, talking about the professional athlete, things like that. A part of the program that I'm doing, I know we'll get to it, but like a part of that is to help change and shift those narratives, to bring mentors from throughout the city to our kids, to talk to them about different things that they can do in order to be successful in life. So it's really connecting all these different groups, you know, the power players, if you will, from the city of Milwaukee, who you may not even think like, you know, that's a black man who's an entrepreneur, like you said yourself. This is a black man who's making this amount of much money, or this black man is a politician, you know, all of these different things. So we can change those. What do you want to be? You know, and there might be some kids that still want to do those things, but at the same time, like, we don't want to have them be so narrow-minded. And that's the only way or path to success, because society tells you that, right? Like when you look at all of the, like you mentioned, the top 1% or whatever, when you look at all of those people who are black that are mostly in that realm, it's based off the entertainment industry for most of them, not all of them, but for there are a lot of them, those people are put at the forefront. And the ones that don't have that, you don't hear about, like, you don't see those stories. You don't have those people reaching out because the media doesn't portray that. Yeah. And so with my going back to college and the things that I'm going through, being in that program, you know, as the only black male, like going through the school of education, as the only person of color, you know, we went as a cohort of 25 people, right? Like when we started. And then that cohort dwindled down as other people realized teaching wasn't for them, right? And so throughout this whole time, I'm the only black face in the room. You know, my professors are white and I love them. Like my professor, I loved her. You know, she definitely helped me go through college, and she was a blessing in my life. Her name's Dr. Pasternak, who connected me with Dr. Rob Longwell Grice, who basically said, like, listen, this is a black man that wants to go to education. I'm gonna make sure he don't pay for nothing. So by the time I went from my sophomore year of college, my second semester sophomore year of college, to the time I graduated, I didn't pay for anything.
That's awesome.
Right?
That's awesome.
So I graduated with like less debt than most people would have on a typical and I double major in English education
You took
and literary.
advantage of it. You took advantage of the
Yeah.
opportunity
Oh
given
yeah.
to you. And here's
Yeah.
the cool part. And this is why this is so important. And this is why we have to realize the return on investment for investing back into people who are disenfranchised in this thing. If you hadn't have been given this opportunity, having a family, there may have been an inflection point in that second, third, and fourth, fifth year of going to school where you were like, hey, I can't do this. Like, I got to start. I can't, because I'm sure it wasn't easy, right?
Yeah.
It wasn't easy. And there's like, man, is this worth it? Do I want to keep going in debt to do this? Do I want to? And that return on that investment is now playing out and will play out for the next 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years, because not just of the work you're directly going to do, but indirectly the impact you're now going to make on other, on a 12-year-old Nate Dean somewhere down the road, and he'll see it as well. And that, man, that is what I like we've got to get people to understand about education and about and why it's so important to reinvest and fix and essentially shatter the system that exists and rebuild it in the right way.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true, because with that being said, I feel like that's one of the reasons why you don't see so many African American males, or just people of color in general, males of color in general, going into like the teaching field, because they don't see that. You don't tangibly see that investment all the time, right? Like, had I not had those people to hook me up with certain things and go and help me go through scholarships and find money and do all those other things, I would have not known that stuff. And so for a typical person, right, like black male who's trying to go to school, you don't always know those things. You're not taught those things. Like, I'm the first one out of my family to graduate off my mom's side, to graduate from college, and I didn't have those like talks and discussions and all of these different things, people to help me guide me through it. Like Ms. Daniels got me there, and she was able to give me some feedback and some tips and some advice, but I didn't really have a lot of like other people and doing a lot, to really help me see the potential. So going through those things, finally graduating, being a only, African American male from a school that at first sent me a rejection letter, fast forwarding years later, I don't know if you saw in the little bio I saw, but that same school just not, gave me an award for being graduate of the decade.
Yeah.
For the things that I've been doing.
How good did that feel?
Man, it's like it was unbelievable, right? Because on one moment I have this rejection letter, which I still have. I gotta frame it. I like the way you frame your stuff. Right?
Absolutely, man. Absolutely.
So like, I still have this rejection letter, right? But right along the rejection letter is also the award that I was a graduate of the decade, right? Who, so it's definitely like, it took that perseverance and those dreams and all that stuff. But I, even at the ceremony when I was talking to people, I'm like, while I'm very thankful and glad that this happened, the tragedy of this is I'm the only one, right? Yeah. Like, there's so many other people who could be great.
You're the exception, not the norm.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So like, and that's when that's like the flip side of it, is like, I tell people like, we're not doing a service by just saying Nate Deans is great. Like, the service is, how do we change the system so where Nate Deans is not just this anomaly? Because I don't want to be the anomaly, right? Like, I want to make sure the whole...
Yeah, you don't want to be the only one they're still talking about 10 years from now that did it.
Exactly. And so that's kind of what I work for and what I push. But right after I graduate from UWM, I go into teaching, do my first 2 years at a charter school called Milwaukee Academy of Science, which was pretty good. It definitely helped me learn a lot of different things. And then after that, I spent the next 7 years actually teaching at the school I graduated from. So I had that opportunity to go back and really do a lot of work with kids from the school and working with teachers who were looking at me like, dude, what? Weren't you just a kid that wouldn't do anything? Yeah. And now I'm teaching.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And so your first years of teaching, you go back to your old high school. What are some things that you were able to take from your experience as a student and implement from a tactical standpoint as a teacher, to maybe give some context or some tips out there to a teacher who may be listening?
Yeah, so I know you mentioned earlier about learning like your students, right?
Yep.
That's definitely true. Like for me, because I was familiar to a lot of different things, it was easier because some of the same places that the kids grew up in, I knew. However, I think, and this is primarily for teachers of color, I think one of the things that we may have a misconception about is that, even though I went to that school, I didn't go in thinking that I was them. And so I knew that there were things about them, about the ways in which they see life that I had to learn. So I had to take off my background and who I was to really know who they were. And so even though I had those things, like if there's one thing I will say that teachers must be able to do is, and you mentioned this before, how do I get off like rule wherever I'm from? How do I take that off and just learn more about them, right? And so when I co-taught African-American literature and history, I co-taught it with another teacher. We basically had a class that was blended. And so I was the English portion of it, and then the other teacher was social studies. So we will look at the historical, facts and information about certain groups, certain African-American time periods, whatever, and then go into the specific stories about, things that are happening. And one of the most phenomenal things I've ever done in my life is to be a part of that class because of the discussions that came out of it, because of the way in which we were able to tap into kids and get them to really be engaged with the material. And I would say that's the other component, right? Is like, how do you use whatever resources you're given or having to implement from the district, whatever that is, how do you take those materials and help your kids see themselves in that work, right? So, and it's a challenge, like it's definitely a challenge, but if a student is not going to engage with the things that you're trying to teach them, they can like you for a million years, but they won't learn anything, right? Yeah. And so we call it cultural. I'm pretty sure most people will know the terminology I'm going to use right now, culturally responsive pedagogy or whatever, but it's really just being about how do I reach kids on the culture and the level they have and making it relevant. So that's what
do you think one of the biggest things with that is just having being empathetic to who they are?
Yeah.
And just understanding.
I think if you can't do that at the basic level, then no matter whatever it is that you do, it won't work, right?
Because I guess if you can't have empathy, you actually don't even really care. Like it doesn't. You're kind of faking it, and kids know that, especially kids of color. They can tell real quick if you're just gaming them or not because of what they've had to deal with.
Yeah, and that was kind of the reason why I decided to step out of the classroom too, because I felt like when I would be teaching, the kids would be like, "Oh, Mr. Jeans, I love coming to your class," but they just left out of so-and-so's class and they were being mean and all this other stuff. So I had to basically help them unpack all of those things that they experienced in their last 6 classes until they got to my class. And it's like, okay, now I'm ready to learn. But it's like, dude, you just missed out on all of these other things because of whatever relationship the teachers has, that empathetic piece behind it, or, the teachers not really believing in our kids. Because there's that component too, where there are teachers who just do not believe that inner city kids of color, whatever you want to call it, can learn on the levels that they can for whatever reason. If that's because of what they may have gotten from their upbringing or background or what they see on a daily basis. But I always said, if you push kids, they will show up. If you push students to do the work that you want them to do, they will show up. But they won't show up if you don't care about them. If you're not empathetic and you don't see them as people, it doesn't matter who's teaching. Yeah. Right.
I'm a firm believer that teaching isn't being given a lesson plan and getting up and sharing the information. Teaching is actually figuring out a way how to connect and motivate kids to want to learn and make it feel like it's their idea, right?
Yeah.
It's like it's getting them to want to feel like, oh, I really do want to learn about this, or I really do want to understand how this works.
Yeah. And so and that's what I had to learn about like my first 2 years at the charter school I was at. I think it was learning the blending of the two, because I felt like there was this really strong component where I was really engaged with kids. I, had really good relationships with kids, but the trick of it was like, I'm still a teacher, right? Like,
Yeah.
I still need to make sure you're getting this content and this rigor. And so that was like my first few years. That was like my biggest challenge. I was really trying to make sure that I built strong relationships. And I felt like, reflecting back on it now.
What did you learn to do? How did you, what clicked to help you understand that?
Perseverance, right? So like teaching the kids perseverance, because there are moments in which when the kid gets frustrated with certain things, having those tips and those tools to say like, listen, I know this is hard. I know this may be like a struggle for you, but we're going to help you get through it. Right. My last year of teaching, I had my English 12 students do portfolios. They're writing portfolios. And so which was actually cool, because I actually partnered with the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, UWM, who wanted to start like this program where they would take kids in without doing the ACT, without doing those things, and looking at different writing samples that they would have to replace like placement tests. So it was piloted in my classroom. But one of the challenges was like trying to get the kids to write, on a college level, right? So it really stretched them, because we blocked out a lot of time to really make sure that the pieces and stuff that they were going to give was an actual reflection and representation of them, and also was college material, right? So it was a transition, and a lot of kids struggled, and a lot of kids were frustrated and upset. And so I think one of the mistakes that a teacher could make out of that is just allowing a kid to make those mistakes, get them to be happy and quiet, if you will, and not really teaching them anything. But like there were so many different components that they were not only learning how to do like the college stuff, but it's like, dude, when stuff is hard, you can't just quit, right? Like you can't just give up. And because of I felt like that year I finally had this thing where I was being able to really engage kids and build those relationships and hold those relationships while also holding them accountable to the things they need to learn. So like my last few years, like I had really gotten into that. And so when you're talking about teachers and you're talking about like ways in which to make sure you're connecting, I think you really have to keep those two things in mind, right? Like you want to build those relationships, but you don't want to sacrifice the education that the kids are getting. Yeah. And sometimes we see them as two different compartments, right? Like, oh, they have to know these terms and do these things, and I'm going to sacrifice, them liking it or liking me or all this other stuff. It's tricky. Like teaching is hard work.
Absolutely.
It's hard work, and you have to do that.
Absolutely. So now by the way, you totally did skip over, and I think it's worth noting. So in 2016, you were actually nominated for Wisconsin Teacher of the Year, which I think is awesome. First of all, also because I know your age and I know how, even going 4 years back, how early that is in your career. So kudos to you for doing that, or receiving that, and also for your peers, because I'm assuming that's a peer nominated thing.
Well, actually, my administrator, my principal at the time was the one that nominated me.
Awesome.
For the Teacher of the Year, which I was shocked about. It threw me off guard, but I mean, I put the work in, and he saw something in me. And so,
were you at your school you graduated from? So you were there. So man, like, see, this is what I'm talking about. Like, like you need, like, so you're talking about framing things up. You need to put like your transcript, your denial letter, your award you got for that, and then you need to put the nomination letter. You need to put that in one big long frame,
Right.
because I think that's important, because it gives a visual representation to the young people that you're trying to motivate. Look, you can start out here
Mm-hmm.
and you can end up here. So because we're told, we're told as kids, right? We're told as kids, you go to school, get a degree, and life's going to work out, right?
Yeah.
Well, the reality of it is that's not the case, right? And it's not going to be the case. I'm even going to argue 2020 moving forward, that's not going to be the case moving forward for even more kids,
Mm-hmm.
because a degree, I don't have a college degree, right? I graduated 154th out of 187 with a 1.6 GPA. I got a 14, I think, on the ACT, right? I just didn't care. It wasn't because I wasn't a smart kid.
Right.
I had ADHD. I had stuff going on at home. I'm hanging out with people I shouldn't be hanging out with. Basketball saved me. You talked about you have a counselor that made a difference for you. Mine was a lady by the name of Jeanette Rowan. She's retired here recently, but she was one of those people where she was a track coach and different things, and she'll pull me aside and sit me down, and she'd tell me, what in the hell are you doing?
Mm-hmm.
You got to get your shit together, and you got to do this. And, yeah, you can't curse at kids and those kind of things, but sometimes you just got to call it like you see it, and you got to be real, because that's how she knew. That's the only way she was going to get my attention. Right.
Mm-hmm.
If you sit down, oh, Shane, you're so smart. Like, I'm going to look at you like you're a liar. Like you're fake. Like, don't talk to me like that. So I think it's awesome, that journey that you took, man. That is, I'll be honest with you, I'm impressed. Like that impresses me as a guy who's done a lot of things, and to know that, man, your community is, like I said, though, that should be the norm, not the exception. But your community is massively blessed to have somebody like you working in it. So we'll fast forward a little bit. Now you're into this program. What are some of your what are some of the things that you're wanting to now achieve? Because now you've transitioned, you got these awards, you spent some years in teaching, and now you're transitioning out of the classroom.
Mm-hmm.
I'm assuming that was to have a bigger impact. Like, I can only impact the kids of this school. Now I can impact the kids of the entire district.
Yeah. So like that, definitely. That's why I did the administrative leadership program, because like I said before, I was starting out, noticing the things that I was hearing about from other classrooms. So I'm like, dude, it's time to really like stretch out what it is that I can make an impact in. So I left my school, Riverside, left there in 2019. I think it was 2019. And went to a different school to be instructional coach. So coaching teachers, helping teachers to implement certain things in their classroom, all those things that you're asking me about as far as like ways in which to engage with students. Yeah. We went over pieces of engagement, culturally responsiveness, knowing, getting to know them.
What are some tips? You sit down with a white teacher, male or female. Mm-hmm. You obviously it doesn't take long. You talk to them for 5 or 10 minutes, and you realize that they didn't grow up with a whole lot of people that look like you or talk like you. What are some initial questions or things that you do to try and help them get it a little bit?
Yeah. So I used to, when I was doing the coaching thing, I would do a kind of like a 6-week professional development piece. None of the resources were of my own, but I was just use some of the resources from like Gloria Lassen Billings pieces on culturally responsiveness. Wisconsin RTI kind of has a really cool chart on what it really looks like to be culturally responsive. So we would go through each one of those things as a staff, right? Like, how do we engage kids? What does African American vernacular English sound like? And,
Sure.
how is it this certain things? So really taking kind of like the different components of what does respect look like? Even going into there, like, what do you think respect is? Because respect in rural America always doesn't look the same. It doesn't look the same.
Correct.
In inner city. But at the same time, you mentioned this earlier, that when you really boil it down, we're all of it is the same. But there's different aspects to it that makes it different. So really helping them to chart out like what that looks like or entails. But for an individual teacher by themselves, like, it definitely goes through the coaching cycle, right? Where you're doing observations in classrooms, and before you're asking, I don't just go off of like things that I hear. Hearsay. Like, I want to observe things and be there for myself, so that way I can like have a conversation about, at this certain time I saw you talk to this person this way. Like, tell me what was going on through your mind. Not being accusatory, but using it as a teachable moment to show them ways in which.
Dude, that's phenomenal. Because you're able to use that teachable moment. Say, hey, and I heard you do this. Here's why this may have been taken out of context by that young man or young lady. And let me give you a little bit of backstory and understanding. What kind of response have you typically gotten from a teacher when that's happened?
I think for the most part, I mean, granted, I've only did it for a year.
Yeah. So
it wasn't like, and in the year that I did it in, the pandemic hit. So it really wasn't a year.
Sure.
But I think for the most part, I was received well, in my building. But because, and this is for people who are like coaches and all those other things. And while I don't have the most experience as in that role, even though I did, do my education and things in that too. But I will say, the same way in which you build relationships with kids as a mentor coach, you do the same thing with teachers, right? So like, I did spend a lot of time building those relationships with the teachers that I had, because I knew I was going to have hard conversations with them. And I wanted them to be at a place where when I had those conversations, it was going to be from a place of respect. And they knew that I was trying to be respectful to them. So when I would do observations, like in classrooms, right, when I walk in and do whatever, one of the things that I would often do, every single classroom I went into, I would have like a walkthrough observation tool where I'm taking notes on like what the teacher says, what the students' responses are. How does that fit into, I know in Wisconsin, we have the Charlotte Danielson framework for teaching. So how do these things fit into the different domains of the frameworks, things like that, to have as my notes as like grows, things that I saw that were well, and then glows, things I saw that were well, and then things that needs improvement, grows. But what I would always do, no matter what, is no matter how chaotic the room looked, whatever, is I would find one positive thing that had happened, right? And I would always take a sticky note with me, write it on the sticky note, like, hey, I really noticed that this went well. This was great. I appreciate you doing that. And just leave it on the teacher's desk, not give it to them, leave it on their desk. And then my gauge was, as I continued to do these things, what I started to notice was that the teachers would leave the notes that I gave them on like their wall somewhere.
Yeah.
As like a reminder for themselves, like, hey, I'm doing this job. So I built like those little small relationships, even when I was frustrated at certain things, because I dealt with, when I was doing the coaching, I dealt with teachers who were combative about, making sure they're teaching district material, implementing materials, teachers who, just was so frustrated with certain kids that they just gave up and didn't want to deal with them. And hearing teachers out of their mouths say, these kids can't learn. Like, these kids literally can't learn. So having to try to build relationships with people that sometimes internally I might be at odds with, but knowing that at the end of the day, I have to do it for the kids.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's going to benefit the kids, overall. So definitely from the coaching model, those are things that I learned as far as like having to do that in a building.
What are Give me a scenario of one student that you don't have to obviously tell the name of the student, but a scenario of a student while you were teaching, and you were like, it was just like something happened, an exchange, an ongoing interaction happened, and you were like, man, this is why I'm doing what I'm doing.
Oh man, so so I'm gonna just. I guess I want to do once. I guess I can do one.
You give as many as you want. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
I guess it's gonna lead up to. And I forgot. I actually meant to mention this, so I'm glad you asked this. But in my African American literature and history class, I had a student who you could tell at the beginning of the year always kept his head down, always was trying to disengage before we really got into the material and the content. And then as we went on, with the year, throughout the year, one day we're in class. And so when we opened up our multicultural literature and African American literature history classes, what we would do is, and it's kind of restorative in a way, just a little bit, but we would, every morning, we would start with a quote, right? So my colleague had this book of quotes, right? And it was like super thick, right?
Yeah.
So he had all of these quotes. And at first, him and I are choosing the quotes, right? And so the kids would take the quotes, write responses to them. I mean, quotes from like Dr. King, Mandela, all of these different groups. They would take the quotes, write responses to them. And we gave them a framework, like 10 minutes, quiet, no talking, just write, whatever it is. And it can be about whatever, if something out of that quote applies to you, apply it to your life, apply it to this, apply it to all these different things. And after we did that, certain kids, probably wouldn't say a word, right? They wouldn't write anything, whatever. And then after the 10 minutes is up, we would discuss and have conversations about the quotes in which the kids were saying. And I mean, talk about some of the most mind-blowing things that the kids would come up with, the things that they would share, the experiences that would happen in that room was special, right? And so out of all of this, and I'm saying all this to say, like, after we did this conversation and we're going, the kids are moving on to the next block, there was one student that came up to me. He's like, man, you know what? I never thought of myself becoming a teacher until I saw you do it. I didn't think teaching was for Black people. And like, literally expressed this to me. And then so much so to the fact, like, now he is in his own teaching program to become one, right?
See, it's already paying off. That's what I'm saying, man. This is awesome.
Yeah, and he wasn't the only one. So there's this, I don't know I know it's nationwide. I'm not sure if it's in Kentucky or not, but I know there's this network called the Literacy Lab. And
okay,
so
I've heard of it. So
yeah, so like the Literacy Lab does, like, its primary goal is to take boys of color, men of color, and make them, teachers, to help them to become teachers. And so Milwaukee has a chapter of the Literacy Lab here.
Awesome.
And I would say about 6 or 7 of those kids came out of my classroom.
That's awesome.
Right? So like, and they're changing narratives too, and they're doing all those things too. But that definitely was one of those moments where it was like, it was validating, right? Like, and it's a whole, like, it's a lot. I could talk all day, but like, that's definitely one of those things that was validating for me to let me know, like, I was doing, this is what I signed up to do, right? And so moving into this next transition, I'm looking to do what I've already been doing and on a district level, with the supports and the things that, the Black and Latino Male Achievement has already been doing without me, with me just being, at a school coordinating things on a school level. So,
yeah. What are some things that you wish you would have known going into teaching that you had to learn the hard way?
Well, I think I said, like, already, definitely the blend of, that's my number one thing, right, was blending the academic rigor and content piece with the building relationships piece. I felt like by the time, the last few years, 4 or 5 years, well, 3 or 4, I should say, I finally kind of got a grasp on it. And then definitely my last year, right? But really blending the two. I would also say, as a teacher of color, right? my school district, 70 over 85, I should say, percent of our kids, 70 to 80, somewhere in that range, are kids of color, black kids,
Wow.
right? It's a lot. It's a lot.
Oh, so it's
And
is it in an inner city district? Is that a majority of what it is?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, and the numbers are around there. Don't quote me on that.
Yeah.
It's a large majority, but I do know that 70% of our workforce for teachers is white, right? So, like, when we talk about these different disparities, like, not only is it hard on the kids, but it's also hard on, you know, the teachers of color too, because the same mantle that I was holding up in college, like, I'm doing that on a daily basis now, right? And so, this may or may not answer your question a little bit, but
oh, you're good.
But I think it's a struggle in the sense that now you're working in a building of staff and you see the frustrations that the kids have. And so you try to gravitate towards that and help them navigate and tap through that. But then you're also taking on some of those other frustrations too, because now you have colleagues that are like, well, you're just a cool teacher and people just like you because you're black.
You're hip. Yeah,
right?
yeah, you're hip to what's
Like,
going on. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, it's not about you actually being authentic and real. And so I built up a team of people too, like in, you know, especially at Riverside. And then the school I was doing the coaching at, like, I built up all my builders, man. I built up a group of guys, man, a group of people who, you know, while it was small, we definitely held each other down. We kept it together and we connected, right? To be those supports for not only the kids, but supports for each other, because being in a system where, you know, perspective is everything. And not only do the kids have their perspectives about their black teachers, but the staff have their perspectives about their black teacher force too. And so having to navigate through those things too, that was the other thing. My first few years, specifically as a black teacher, black male teacher, I had to learn like how to navigate through that, because there were things that I felt, you know, you feel that, you know, that was taken whatever way.
Do you feel like maybe you were even like slighted from your ability to actually teach? Like, people were like, there were white teachers given too much weight to the fact that you were black, and that's why you were able to connect rather than you're just a really good teacher.
Yep.
Yeah. So that's God, so unfortunate. So really, I guess to kind of answer some of it, I guess in the last two questions, is we've got to figure out a way to educate a teaching force as a whole on better understanding and relating to not just the students of color, but also realizing and how to, like, instead of having a way of looking at you and saying, oh, like, we've got to make it to where it's okay for them to come to you and say, give me some tips, like, help me, like you obviously have this licked, you have this, you know, you can figure this out. Can you help me? What am I doing wrong? Like, I said this, is this wrong? Because I think and not just talking about teaching. I think there's in America, we have what I call an epidemic of silence, right? So I live here in the South, and we're taught not to, you know, you coming up, you don't talk about race, you don't talk about religion, you don't talk about money. Well, the reality of it is if we don't talk about these things, we're never going to be educated on it, and we're never going to learn about it. I'm not going to learn how to be financially, you know, sufficient. I'm not going to know how to communicate about race. And I think that is, we've got to figure out how to break the barrier, because there is a barrier of, I guess a lot of it is environmental, where maybe the white teachers feel like, well, am I being offensive if I go and ask this, or if I go and the other side of it is I'm sure as a person of color, while I'm not one and can't relate to that aspect, I'm aware of some of the things that happen. And, you know, there's that, well, you know, is this
person perceive black people? Is this even going to be like, are they actually even going to really help me? Are they just going to help me just because I'm black and I asked? So there's like this invisible wall, and it's creating an environment that says, hey, while it's not your job as a person of color to raise your hand and say, hey, if anybody has an issue with these kids of color and you want to know, come ask me. Like, there has to go both ways, and we got to be able to establish we're all here for the common goal, right? And I use the narrative of sports. While I'm sure racism exists in some locker rooms, it almost isn't even the oxygen for it to survive doesn't exist,
right?
Because we're all working for a common goal, right? We're working towards different things, and we've got to figure out how to build that camaraderie, right?
Mm-hmm.
That teammate camaraderie of, hey, you've got something that I need. Help me out, man. Like, help me out. Like, hey, let's go to dinner, or you bring your wife over and come over and talk. Cause I just want to pick your brain, because I want to learn and be able to help connect with these kids more.
Yeah. But I think a part of that has to come from a person noticing that to begin with, right? Like,
it's the empathy.
Right. Exactly. I was just going to say that, like, it comes from them wanting to do that. And this is where I think on a district level, they have to just do things in order to implement, if they really want to save the educational lives of our black and brown children. Like, they have to push for if you're not going to have the empathy within yourself, then you just have to do the job. And the job is empathy. Like, I don't really know how else to put it. It just comes from a place of knowing that you have these kids in your care, and that you have to reach and to tap them and to educate them. Like, that's what you're getting paid to do. And so, like you said, a part of it is like, hey, I don't mind being the one, like, hey, if you got something to ask me about. But the other part is like, there needs to be this expectation that just needs to happen. Like, you're expected to do these things. Like, you are expected to strip away whatever rule upbringing you have and educate and to teach. And it should never be acceptable for some of the statistics that our school systems have. Like, the school to prison pipeline should not be an acceptable thing, right? Like, we should not be comfortable being in a school where we're feeding or tapping into that system. And like,
I'm with you. I firmly, like, I'm with you. And if you're going to take a job as a teacher, and listen, when you take a job at a school, 9 times out of 10, that teacher knows what the demographic is in that school. Then, and I don't want to be negative, but shame on you if you're not immediately doing things to learn and have the self-awareness. Now, a first, second, third year teacher, maybe you don't have the experience and to know, and the self-awareness to know that, because maybe you don't have an issue with people of color, but if you don't know how to communicate and relate and to actually understand, it's almost like, as a principal, if I hire you, I should be giving you a book on anti-racism. I should be giving you a book on these things that says, hey, this is a part of your PD in your first 4 weeks. You have to learn this. And I think it doesn't happen because we live in a culture where we're afraid to offend people, right? Like, my podcast, and I do it, and people are like, when AT and I first did it, he's like, these people are like, you do know you're white and you're talking on the internet about racism. I'm like, yes, because white men are what's going to help eradicate racism. Black people, it's not that they're incapable of doing it. They've been trying to do it. It's going to take the white guy saying the comment, and then, hey, checking him and saying, no, we're not going to use that language. So we have to, because a majority of your administration is also white.
Yeah.
So is the empathy there, right? And it's understanding, like, hey, here's a book. I don't want to scare you. You need to watch Here, go watch some movies. Let's go watch Lean on Me. Stand by Me. Right. Let's go watch some things that you're going to understand, so that you can at least trigger a thought process of, oh, this. Because a lot of times, look, I'm one of those people that I don't believe a majority of the people in America are racist. I think a majority of the white people in America haven't taken the time or understood how to take the time, because we're also not educated on it, right? As much as, like, I love it, the fact that you're telling me you taught a class of blended kids, math, or was it math or science and English?
Social studies.
Yeah, so social studies and English, and you taught them a curriculum that revolves around African and African American culture. And we're not taught about, that because white kids need that education and that understanding of that part of history just as much as black kids do. And so we gotta figure out a way to do that. And it sounds like that is more. So maybe creating these conversations, and I do obviously thank you for being so open to have that conversation with me, because this, while some people are going to see this and see a black guy from Wisconsin and a white guy from Kentucky talking about race, and it's going to not look normal to them, it needs to be normal, and it needs to be, more commonplace. So, man, your journey. So tell me a little bit more now. Let's dive in. We don't want to go too long, but tell me what the program you're involved with now is. The Black and Latino Male Achievement Program. What is the mission statement, or what is the goal for that?
Sure. So the purpose of the program is obviously to help facilitate and educate, Black and Latino males of color. It came out of the Office of Civil Rights resolution that it has against our district, which looked at disproportionality of suspension rates for Black and Latino kids within our schools. They were just astronomical, basically, based off of the proportions of students that are there and the rates in which people were, kids were being suspended. So this department came out of that. And what it seeks to do is to, educate kids on our 12. We have 12 guiding principles that, we infiltrate to the kids. And so what we try to do is to have conversations and to reach out about all those things that, are impacted in their lives, that the things that they go through. And the goal is to reach out and to have the group of kids that we reach out and go back into their communities and share all of these different aspects of it, right? And so what the department typically did, I start Monday. I'm talking as if I'm already there now, but I start Monday. But I have been working with, the coordinators and all the different people that have been in the groups for, the past 3 or 4 years. They're really good friends of mine. So it's something that I've been a part of. I just am now officially working on the district level. And so, they've done partnerships with the Milwaukee Bucks. I know Chris Middleton had, contributed some things to this department. And Malcolm Brogdon when he was with the Bucks too. So the Bucks were very a part of this organization. There's this manhood development course in which we have a curriculum for these different courses that we have, and some of our kids go through that. The department they do these first Thursday meetings or whatever, where when we were in person, we would, mentors from the city would come to, different schools, and they would meet with a group of 35 kids or students who would, go through the different guiding principles of, and talk about, different things and apply it to their lives and their jobs and other things like that. And so, there's just a lot of different things that we do as far as school culture, having ambassadors to talk to our superintendent. So we have a few Black and Latino Male Achievement student ambassadors who look at district policies, who look at different things and give suggestions to our superintendent. So there's a lot of different aspects that the program impacts on a school level. So that's kind of, the rundown of it.
Awesome.
I know my part will be primarily to continue the student contact, the outreach, the mentorship, those type of things like that. But we're looking to potentially expand and go into more buildings and really have impact on the culture of schools. And so one of the things, like our conversation that we just mentioned, was talking about holding teachers accountable and also giving them the supports. So I'm hoping, like, going into this position, I can be in a space where I can give out culturally responsiveness, to teachers too, because I feel like a part of being in this department is protecting the lives of Black and brown boys of color.
Yeah, so, absolutely. And the reality of it is they need more advocating. It's not. I think sometimes school districts, they don't have the resources, or they'll try a donuts with dad program. And I mean, yeah, those have been proven to actually help with certain things and that kind of stuff. But it's way deeper than that. You and I think it's awesome that they've got somebody like you to be able to go and show up at a kid's house, knock on the door and say, look, man, I know this and this is happening, or I know you've experienced this. Let's talk about it and let's figure out a way to get you back on track. And, because,
I guess, well, before you keep going, there's the other, I was going to mention this, but there's that other aspect of it, because I think one of the misconceptions people get about this program is that it's like, and I hate to use this, but it's the only thing that's popping in my head, like it's like a scare straight program.
Yeah.
And it's not, right? So like when they first did, or to put the department together, they did some research and they looked at a mentoring program out in the city of Oakland. And so what they developed this concept was around the rule of the third, right? So typically you work with about 30 to 35 students. And those ranges from different areas or different components of their lives. So, you might have your kids who, just are, straight, not for school and not trying to do well and just are turned off. Then there's a third of the kids who are like your straight A students, who are really on the right track, who you may not even feel like they potentially need a mentoring program or whatever. And then those third that's in the middle. And so the idea is to bring those different groups together to build a bond and camaraderie within themselves. So they in turn take what they do and what we do at the program back to their own friends and communities and like that. Because when I was doing the program at Riverside, it's so funny because I had my 35 and they loved coming to the meetings. They loved doing it. And it was like other kids would come from other ones like, yo, I want to be in the program too. I want to do it too. I'm like, sorry, with you. So, but yeah, I just throw that in there.
No, that's awesome. That's because so I have a unique understanding and just through life experiences, environment, and friends that I get it. But I also understand what's that doing. So I want to divulge some of my perception of what that's doing, so that because there are going to be some white teachers or white educators that are going to hear this and maybe not pick up on it. So essentially what that addresses, when you bring people of color from, we'll call it the most positive end of the spectrum to the most negative end of the spectrum, kind of together, it eliminates the things that thrive within, that are internally only exist within a community of people of color, that are things like self-hate or, where it's, oh, well, you're better than me, or you don't talk Black enough, or because that's where those things stem from, to where it normalizes more of, hey, this is, we're the same, right? So that's where there's a layer of this system doesn't just separate and segregate Black and white people. It also segregates different socioeconomic, people, even that are people of color. And I think that, man, the fact that I didn't pick up on that when you were telling me about it earlier, the fact that you guys are doing that, man, they've really put some thought process into this. And, I think it's something, hopefully they're doing a lot of documentation and a lot of, because it's no doubt something that a lot of school districts can definitely pick up on and learn from, man. That's awesome.
Well, I mean, as far as like what I know, as far as that aspect of it, by surveying the kids that are part of the program, they've all received some positive. They've all said positive things about being in the program from itself. To some of the behaviors that change in classrooms. That's one of the things that document, like how does that look? To the grades and how they're doing, performing well in school. So there are some shifts, but I will say this too, and this is just like what I personally feel and believe, like knowing my own experiences and the way that I went to school, like there's just also those other things that you're not going to document and you're not going to see, right? Like when I figured it out, I felt, I was 20 or whatever. I was 2 years removed from school.
Yeah.
Right. So, but all of that stuff had an impact on me, with my, mentor, with Virginia Daniels, who helped me out. Like she wasn't able to make that necessarily a data point per se. So I think eventually it goes to this. It goes just down to our districts and our people willing enough to care about Black and brown lives enough to want to do a program like this, right? Yeah. Like, are you always going to have every single data point? Like there will be you're going to see some positive change, but that positive change is not going to grow exponentially. So sometimes when we look at stuff like this, there's this feeling of, I need to see these results right now.
Oh man, I'm glad you said that.
You don't always, it's not going to always be there because that's that human, that's that.
Yeah, it's not going to show up on his portfolio score. It's not going to show up on his standardized testing. You might not see it until 6 years before he graduates college and he comes back and he thanks you and he says, you changed my life. And now I'm doing this, this, and this. That is the part that the education system as a whole, we've got to quit looking at the KPIs. And we've got to start looking at the things that we can't quantify directly back to this. Like there are so many more. And I think you're a perfect example of that. Is statistically speaking, if you would have been judged, or your teachers and your counselors would have been graded or judged off of your performance, they would have been given a negative mark. But the ones that impacted you and the ones that did a positive, if we actually look at the long tail run of how this works, they would have been given an award, right? Mm-hmm. So that is, man, I'm so glad you hit on that, because we've got to get to this mindset of, I was the kid. Shane Howard was the kid that you looked at and you kicked out of class and you were like, I'm not giving this kid, like, instead of understanding and relating what, kids don't come to school just to be a jerk. They don't, no one wakes up and says, I'm going to be a jerk today. No adult does. We have things going on. And man, I'm so glad you hit on that.
Yeah, but it's because it's true. Those aspects of it are true, right? And like, what now? Like, does my counselor and my people, that go help me out, like, do they go now 15 years ago and change that data point? Like, it doesn't work that way. And so like districts need to start looking at, when it comes to culturally relevant pedagogy, when it comes to, really, what does classroom discipline look like? When it comes to all these different things, really look at the data points and the way in which they're evaluating things. Like, I, for one, am not a proponent for using standardized testing to like talk about, how much we're going to put dollars or take dollars away from anything like that. Testing is a measure of what kids know, but it should not impact the way in which we do school.
I've never taken a test in life that decides whether or not I get to advance. Like, it doesn't. Every test that I was given in school, I did the minimal amount to get by, the minimal amount to do it. But yet, how can I go and build a multi-million-dollar business across? You know what I'm saying? It's like that's not indicative. That is not a litmus of whether or not I am going to be successful or not.
Right.
And that is our challenge as a society. That is our challenge, your challenge, my challenge as a speaker and motivator, to figure out how to start creating a culture and an understanding that education is not about A's and B's. Education, like, there's things that I I learned a lot about political science class. My political science class, I got a 61 and a 35 for an average of 48, right? That was taught by my former mayor. But I can speak very openly and educated on politics because like, so it doesn't like I the highest math class I passed was algebra 2 and I got a 62. So I barely graduated. I barely got it, but I can do books for, you know, $1 million plus bit, you know what I'm saying? Like, so like it's these things that we got to figure out. And that's why I love what I do in being able to teach and show, because I show these contrasts, right? Of this doesn't equate to this. So, you know, so much of it comes back to it, man. Nate, I want to tell you, I'm going to let you hit on anything, because I know I've kind of guided you down a path and there may be some things you want to go on. So I'm going to let you share, and then I'm going to ask you a couple personal questions as I do with everybody, and then we'll kind of wrap it up.
No, that's dope. I was just actually going to go off of what you're saying to talk about like education now, right? Like within this pandemic and really being virtual, I think, and maybe it's just because I'm an optimistic person or whatever, but
yeah,
I almost feel like this is a good time to change a lot of the practices and the ways in which we have been doing school. Whether that's, you know, virtual or not, but like really thinking about, you know, how can we change some of this testing stuff, right? Because like everything's gonna shift. So this is a moment and opportunity to create and to really equalize the playing field for Black and brown people, right?
Absolutely.
And so what are the things that not only just, you know, from a virtual learning standpoint, because it's hard. Like I've seen teachers go through it, you know, and try to do the virtual learning and try to have classrooms. Like it's definitely difficult. It's definitely changing things, you know, and you miss the student interaction and contact. So it's definitely a difficult spot and a difficult place to be in. But at the same time, it also gives us the flexibility to create something new and something different, something that no one has ever seen before, right? And who knows how well that can work. But the things that we have to do and keep in mind is that no matter, regardless of whatever it is, teachers have to treat students as humans and be empathetic, no matter if that's virtual, no matter if that's face-to-face, no matter what aspect that is. How can we look at our policies that prevent those things from happening, and shift that back when we do come back? You know, what is the things that we can start implementing to make sure that our kids feel safe and welcome, not just from a pandemic standpoint or a COVID-19 standpoint, but from a standpoint of being valued in the classroom? Because when COVID will go away, those things also have to go away too. Right. Yeah. So we have to be prepared for those things.
Perfect time for disruption and a reset button. And I've told people about this about their personal life, man. If your career got, you know, you lost your job, like this is a perfect time to hit the reset button and go about it and make changes that you normally would not have made. Everybody lost a job. Not everybody. A large majority of people lost a job. A lot of people are financially in trouble. So it's an even playing field now. And there's never been another time, even when we talk about race relations. I mean, I'm 40. In my lifetime, I've never seen as many white people speaking out and speaking against racism ever. And you've seen it firsthand. I'm sure when these things started, you know, you're seeing, or I don't know if you were active and you're out and about at some of the protests or whatever. And you're like, well, wait a second, where'd all these white people come from? Like, where have you guys been my whole life? Right. So, you know, it's never been a better time for that. And you're right. If you're stressed out as a teacher and the online learning or the distance learning is stressing you out, imagine how the kids feel, right? Imagine how stressed out they are. So again, I tell you what, the word of 2020 has to be empathy, right? If I'm going to understand, I've got to learn to, if I want you to understand me, listen to me. I'm teaching you, listen to me. Well, then you've got to give that same energy in your job and say, I need to listen to you. I need to, if that means, hey, stick around when everybody logs off Zoom, I'm going to send you another link. Let's hop on an extra Zoom and if that means you're 5 minutes late to the next class because you need to check in and you see something's going on with this kid, you got to do those things. And my wife stresses it. She's like, man, I got to set 17 different, because our district here has chose you can go in if you want to. While I don't think it's going to last very long, and I think we're going to end up with kids going back to school, I think we're going to end up back kind of like we were back in March, April, and May. She's like, I got to set 17 different alarms because I have to take breaks at certain times. We have to let them, because I got to take the whole classroom to a bathroom break. We got to stand 6 feet apart. That means we're going to have 100 feet of the hallway taken up. Like, there's all these different things that are, so let's not worry. So this is a perfect year for us not to worry so much about, are you getting exactly what happened at this time period in the Roman Empire? Are we actually getting things that we can learn and help us go through? Because what I believe, and that's because I went through challenges in my life, I believe there were studies that will actually go and show that we're not seeing an academic or life performance fall off with these kids whose education has been disrupted. I actually think you're going to see an extra level of resilience, perseverance, and understanding of the world, because they're now forced to environmentally deal with some things in a way that we've not allowed them to deal with. Right?
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, it's awesome. I tell you what, Nate, it has been an absolute joy. I did not expect this conversation. I don't really go into these with a whole lot of expectation, because everybody has their own journey. I'm going to tell you right now, I'm going to reach out to you on a personal level, because I think you're somebody, man. I have a firm motto in my life is, if you find really good people who are all about disruption and positive change and helping other people, you keep those people close to you, you keep those people around, and man, no doubt you're one of those people. So a couple questions that I ask you, and I ask everybody different compared to where they're at. What is your go-to snack? Because all teachers have that drawer of snacks, right? It's like, I've been there all day. I might not get my planning period this time. What's your go-to snack at school?
So that depends. Am I doing my low carb diet, or am I not doing my low carb?
Let's go with both. Let's go with both.
So if I'm low carb, then it's probably like some like peanuts, pistachios, something like that. If I'm not, then I'm probably eating a bag of chips that one of the kids gave me.
Yeah, no doubt.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, whatever.
Yeah.
So something like that.
So second question, all-time favorite school meal.
Like from the school or
From
just
the school.
Okay. It's gotta be the mock chicken legs.
Okay.
Like,
I've never heard of these before, so I'm gonna have to Google them now. So describe
Don't
them.
judge me. Don't judge me. It's just fake chicken. I mean, I don't know.
It's like a chicken leg that's like not really a chicken leg.
It don't even look like a chicken leg, but that's what we call them.
Oh man.
I mean, it does, but it doesn't.
Okay.
Google it.
Yeah, mine was the rectangle sausage pizza, right? Like that was like, it was fit in the rectangle plate. It was perfect. Had the little bitty specks of sausage on there. That's mine.
That's a close second.
Yeah, that's easily mine. So the last thing is, so I'm actually gonna ask you a different one. What's one movie that you feel like white teachers could watch to get a better understanding of something in your world as a teacher and person of color?
Oh man.
And you can take a second to think about it, because I know I'm throwing these at you at random.
No, that's cool. I know Freedom Writers is definitely one. I don't know if you've ever heard that one. That's definitely one.
That's on Netflix, I think, right now. I think
so, yeah. So that's definitely one where you can take a look and see how someone kind of reaches out to people. I know you mentioned Lean on Me.
Yeah.
And Joe Clark, that's my dude, but I had to rewatch it back. Like after I got my degree in administrative leadership, I went back to rewatch it, whatever. It's like, man, hey, Joe, some of this stuff, man, you can't get away
Yeah,
with
you
it.
can't. You can't. Yeah,
Bring the kids to the stage and be like, all right, everybody get out. Like,
yeah.
But it's definitely some things you can pull out of that.
Yeah. I think some of it is just to give context to realize that you got to be creative. And I think that's what you got to be creative on how to reach some of these kids. If you got a kid who's gang banging and selling dope in high school, sitting down and talking to him in a way that what he would equate to, and I'm giving, those folks that don't, talking to him as a square, then communicate, he's not going to get it. He's not going to understand. So you got to sit down and you got to be creative. If you want to have the empathy to truly try to make an impact on him, you got to try ask questions and get to know him for sure. What is your wife? Go ahead.
Speaking a language, right, but not being offensive when you speak it, right? Like, because there's a way to do it. Like, there's a way where you can reach out to people, but then there's also a way where people know you faking and you just trying.
You got to be authentic.
So you
got to be. What does your wife teach?
She's a first grade teacher.
Oh man.
Yeah, first grade.
And she's got the house organized. She keeps y'all. She keeps y'all in line.
I gotta go as soon as I get done with this and paint my house and do all this.
Oh man. Well, see. So now I know why you scheduled this on a Saturday. You're giving you a little bit of time away. Like, hey, I'm in the house. I'm good. Well, Nate, listen, man. I actually would love to have you back on later in the school year after you've had some time kind of in the new position, because I'd love to hear more about what you're doing, man. And you truly embody what we talk about here as you wake up every day and you accept the challenges that come before you as an educator that are brought to you by these beautiful human beings, no matter how flawed they are, no matter, how hard-headed they are, no matter how, disrespectful they are. You accept those challenges, and in the world of teaching, our society needs way more people like you, man. And I hope you know that. I hope I don't not necessarily look at like you are different. You definitely are different than a lot of other people out there. And I hope you know that.
Thanks, man. Appreciate that.
Awesome. Thank you for taking some time. There's no doubt this would be a big time. So appreciate you taking the time. I also appreciate you allowing me to play a part in you playing a little bit of hooky on some of the honeydew list as well, man. So I hope your last weekend, because you got to start school next week, right?
No, so our kids actually went back this past week. So we had our first week of school.
Okay.
So they're back. Everything's full going.
Awesome.
My district is virtual. Other districts around Wisconsin are doing different things, but we're virtual. So
awesome. Well, best of luck to you, man. Best of luck in the new role. Best of luck in what you're rolling out. And I think it's an awesome thing that you're doing. Maybe one of these days I'll get booked as a teacher. I'll come up that way. You and I can go out to dinner and we'll sit down and have a chat and talk some sports.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Awesome.
For sure. You can do that.
Thank you so much, man, and appreciate you coming on, Nate.
All right, man.
All right, cheers.